New believers are often confronted with various ideas, and actually even old believers often are. And because they are often new to the faith, they can be more easily swayed and uncertain of what exactly is true. Now, I say that, and I also want to acknowledge that even those who've been believers for a long time sometimes still struggle with that, especially maybe kids who've been raised in Christian homes come to that point in their teens or 20s where they go to college and hear all these different ideas. And it's like, wait, is what I believe is true? Is this person's idea better than mine? And this was a huge, huge problem, especially in the early church, because in the early church, everyone was a new believer. Everybody. There were no long-standing, mature Christian. Everybody had only been a Christian for a few years. And so everybody needed help and guidance walking in the truth. So many of Paul's letters are meant to help do that, to guide people in truth and keep them away from wrong belief and false teachings. But this is especially true with this letter to the church in Colossae and Laodicea called Colossians. The main focus, the main thrust of this letter appears to be, I need you guys to make sure, let's talk about some truth issues here. And we'll find when we're reading this letter together that there's a strong sense of explaining doctrine. I know that's kind of a big word, but doctrine, what is true? That's basically all. It's a big word for what is true. Is this true? What is true about Christ? What is true about the life he calls us to, as opposed to other ideas and false beliefs that were trying to creep into the church? This is similar to what we saw in the Gospel of John. What is true? What should be believed? What should I hold to versus what should be rejected as false, or what we might call heresy, something that's not true? And also, and more under the surface, and I think this is a big part of understanding this letter, when the Greek people talked about finding life and finding goodness, they used this word that Sophia we translate as wisdom. Philosophia, philosophy, is the love of wisdom, and it's all aimed at discovering goodness. What is good for man is what the philosophers asked. And this idea of wisdom permeates so much of the Old Testament and especially the New Testament. The Colossians were Greeks mainly. They were in Greece. And so the idea of wisdom, where does it come from? How do you find it? Where will I get the information I need to have a good life? Is it from all these different other philosophies, these people over here tell me this, these people over tell me this? And even today, we're all still looking for it, aren't we? We're all still looking for wisdom. Where does it come from? And Paul wants to write to the church and clearly state, listen, there is only one true source. Anything else is going to lead you astray. So his purpose for writing, he's heard yet again reports that a young church is being led astray by false teaching. And as he continues, we'll get in the pastoral letters, a few videos that'll really get to him. So he sits down and he wants to write and explain the true gospel, refute everything pretending to be, but isn't quite not, but also to focus on where does truth come from? Specifically here in Colossae, we don't know exactly what Paul is writing against. It wasn't a specific thing, but we can tell from his responses, some of the things that they were probably hearing and wrestling with. There appear to be two general things that especially bothered him. The first I would just label as mysticism. And now when I say mysticism, I don't mean like supernatural. Paul believed in the supernatural, clearly. I mean something more the idea of like this sort of idea that to find wisdom, I got to touch into something mystical or spiritual. A lot of pagan ideas, visionary experiences that place the mystical ahead of Christ, some deeper knowledge. Later, this is something called Gnosticism, a search for a deeper knowledge or wisdom inside the spiritual things, worship of angels, hidden wisdom apart from Christ, old superstitions, elements of their pagan lives. Any ideas that try to make the physical bad or secondary and the spiritual what really matters. Paul kind of wants to come against this. Like, let's not get too worried about that stuff. Again, I'm not talking about supernatural. I'm talking about looking for knowledge and wisdom in spiritual codes and things like that. And then the second thing is what we call asceticism. Asceticism, think of like this came a lot later in the Middle Ages where a monk might want to lower themselves in false humility in order to receive more from God and might punish their body or something. It's like hurting myself or punishing myself or trying to make myself nothing in order to get something from God, abusing the flesh, drastic fasting, self-abasement, strict external rules in order to please God. And some of these even including the Jewish law. And for Paul, this goes against grace because you don't earn that from God. They have an appearance of godliness and righteousness, but they're really no value. They're just you trying to earn something God has already given you. So mysticism and asceticism, there's just stuff that's being added, looking for ways to get wisdom and find things. And this is all garbage. Let's talk about the truth here. And the truth is this, the big idea, Christ alone. Both of these things have something in common, asceticism and mysticism. They both represent what we would call syncretism. And syncretism is bringing together different ideas. It's the belief that you can mix and mash different religions together, add a bit of this, add a bit of that. I'll take some of this, I'll take some of that. And for Paul, whether it's going back to any of your old pagan superstitions, seeing psychics or oracles or practicing that stuff, or even if it's reverting to the Jewish laws, you're trying to be both living in the spirit and in the world. And no, don't do it. Mixing two things. These things don't mix. They don't. All you need is Christ. And a big idea that we have today, that where we see this, is what we call post-modernity, where a kind of general view of our world today is whatever goes well, whatever, do your thing, live your truth, whatever feels good, right? Is there even truth? We don't know. Find it wherever you want. Follow your heart. And this is something that Paul wants to strongly fight against. Anything being added to the complete and total supremacy of Christ. It's not looking for other things. It's not looking eternal. It's looking at Jesus alone. He is supreme. He is the source of all things, the source of wisdom. He is the only one that will lead you where you want to go. It is Christ alone. And so throughout the letter, Paul will again and again call people back away from other religions, past paganism, the other crap they're hearing, wrong thinking, and turn in the direction of Christ alone. He's all you need. He's all that you need. The one who gives real life, the one who defeats the power of sin, is the only one we need, not angels or mystical worships or Old Testament laws. It's just Jesus. That is the heartbeat of this letter. So let's walk through it together and see the way that this breaks down for Paul. He opens with a greeting, as all of his letters does, acknowledging their faith. He recognizes they're honest believers. I see that you guys are genuine. You're really wanting the truth here. So I'm asking that God would give you wisdom and understanding, that God would give you wisdom, that you wouldn't seek it from other places, so that you'll know his will, so that you'll know what it looks like to live out this life. I'm praying that you would seek it from the one true source, from God, and avoid false teachings and being led astray by things that are not centered on Christ. And so starting in verse 15 up into chapter 2, he talks about the supremacy of Christ. He's at the top. He has no equal. There's no one that competes or vies for his lordship. He alone is the source. He alone is everything we're looking for. If you want to know God, or you want to know anything about God, or you want God to reveal truth to you, you don't need to seek some deeper mystical source, nor do you need to revert back to old Jewish traditions. You just need to look to the Son, to Jesus. He is the image of the invisible God. He is who God is, and he alone shows us the Father, saves us from sin, and reveals truth to us. Nothing else is needed. Nothing else is needed. All you need in your life is Christ. He is wisdom incarnate. He is the truth you're looking for in human flesh, speaking and revealing directly to us. You don't need anything else. And now I'm not saying as a Christian we need to do everything alone. I'm just saying in search of what we're looking for, he is it. This is the message Paul is giving his entire life to spread, and the only one they should accept. And he strenuously is contending for them to hold to the truth, Christ alone, supremacy of Christ. And then in the middle of chapter 2, he'll then begin to really break down it's Christ over against any and all other religions, all other ideas. He argues against hollow and deceptive philosophies, love of wisdoms, the other ways people are seeking wisdom, which would try to take away from or add to Christ, or be like, well, Christ is good, but also this. You have some of Christ, but you should also consider this philosophy over here, this way. Find different sources. Earlier pagan traditions, worshiping false deities, Jewish attempts to bring Gentiles back to the works of the law. Paul's like, you're dead to all that old nonsense. You don't need it. The source of wisdom is here. Think about this. The one who spoke a word and brought the universe into existence, the one who designed your innermost being and knows you, knows everything about you, knows all things. He is Christ. What else do you need? Why would you try to add anything to the maker of the universe? So don't be led astray by people who worship angels or talk about a secret wisdom or try to make you overly strict to live life. And well, yeah, you can follow Jesus, but you got to be really harsh on yourself and do all these rules and stuff. It's like, whoa, did Jesus tell me to do that? No. If Jesus didn't tell me to do that, I'm not adding to it. It's just going back and trying to figure things out with human wisdom in the world. No. All that I need is Jesus and what he tells me to do. And a lot of those things, they can appear good. Sometimes when people say, well, this is what you should do to be a Christian, it might have the appearance of, yeah, that does look very Christian-y to me. But it's like, hold on, did Jesus tell me to do that? Or did you tell me to do that? And maybe there's some wisdom in it, but I'm following Christ alone and what he calls me to. And this picks up in chapter 3, to live in Christ. Since those things are not worthy of living for, but only Christ and what he calls us to, strive to imitate, or is that like become like, live like him through the power of his Spirit. His Spirit lives in us in order for us to live like him and experience the life that he is leading us to, that he calls true, that he calls good. This picks up a number of different themes concerning Christian living. Some of the things we already saw in Ephesians, he's now kind of repeating household codes, things like that, pertaining to our relationship with each other and with God. So you can kind of compare and similarities there. But a big idea that I just want to touch on briefly is there's this interesting idea of don't get all spiritual. Now, when I say that, I want to offer a bit of clarity, because sometimes the word spiritual and the word supernatural almost become kind of the same thing. And people say, don't get all spiritual. They might mean that as in don't believe in the supernatural or don't believe in miracles or things like that. There's a difference between saying, I believe in the supernatural. Like God is spirit. God is supernatural. I want to see God move in ways that are outside of my normal human understanding and reasoning. But to get all spiritual is to make everything spiritual. Like sometimes life is just lived. Like God's wisdom to us is actually very practical. It speaks to us in a way of like, here's actually how to live your life today. Here's wisdom for your marriage. Here's wisdom for parenting. Here's wisdom for going to work tomorrow and finding God's goodness. When everything is spiritual, everything is, the devil or an angel. It's like Christ speaks truth to us, and some of it is supernatural, but it's all practical. It's for your life today. And some streams of Christianity can kind of really struggle with this, but I would just say I believe in the supernatural, and we're called to. Paul isn't denying the supernatural. He actually says like powers and principalities and rulers and heavenly places. He believes in a supernatural world, but he's saying that Christ's wisdom is for our lives today. There's something practical and real about you going through your life today here on earth, experiencing God's goodness by following Christ and what he calls us to day in and day out. And so actually this section of the letter can seem like a lot of rules, but remember what Paul is saying is to imitate Christ in your daily life in order to bring about the life he calls for you. That is the most spiritual thing we can do. The most spiritual thing you can do is accept the wisdom of Christ, which has been revealed through his Spirit, and follow and obey it and live it out in your life. And so Paul is offering a picture of what Christ is like for us to follow. These are the things that are true of him and true of his kingdom. So act this way, the mindset, as we saw in our letter to Philippians, of a citizen in order to enjoy the life he has for them. And then he ends with a final greeting, reminding them they belong to a larger community of believers, encouraging them to continue to grow and love one another in unity, as we've seen in so many of his letters. So what is the big idea? Christ is all you need. He's at the top and he stands alone. He has no competitors. All that you need in your life is to seek Jesus and follow him in order to discover and live out the life you're created for. You don't need anything else. You don't need other religions. You don't need other philosophies or wisdoms. Christ has it all. And I have heard people say, well, isn't there truth in other philosophies? Are you saying that all philosophies have no truth? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that whatever truth there is already in Christ. So you don't need them. And those things are often mixed with things that aren't of Christ and therefore will ultimately lead you astray. If you want to find the life God has for you, follow Jesus, trust him alone, obey him, and you will experience it. That's the message. And it's a good message. All right. So with that, we're now going to turn to a slightly different shift. Paul's now going to start writing some letters to leaders and we'll call them the pastoral letters, but a lot more great and goodness things to read through as we continue to study the New Testament together. So I'm glad you're with us. Let's keep going together and keep reading God's word for all that it's worth. Thanks, guys.